That's my Hitchcock thing where I've got to make sure I'm present on every record without saying something stupid. On Liturgy, they put I wasn't responsible for it, but when we're recording the first song here in America, you hear us kind of tuning up, and it's like, okay, everybody, I'm not really ready to play this, but like, let's do it anyway, man. You know, and I've had people. I've gone places to play, and I'll go, okay, well, I'll be talking to the worship band, so I'll go, okay, we're going to do this song. They go, you're the guy. Yeah. You're that guy. I thought it was Rich.
Do the thing.
Yeah, do the thing.
Welcome to A Ragamuffin Archive Revisited special presentation, celebrating the 30th anniversary of A Liturgy, A Legacy, and A Ragamuffin Band. I'm Joe Cook. Every week on this program, we dive deep into our archives and beyond to bring you some of the best rare recordings of Rich Mullins and a Ragamuffin Band, as well as music by other artists who worked with them or were influenced by them. Tonight, we'll be taking an in-depth look at A Liturgy, A Legacy, and a Ragamuffin Band, the landmark album by Rich Mullins, which was released 30 years ago this week, on October 26, 1993. The Liturgy album is considered by many to be Rich Mullins' magnum opus, his greatest work, and even CCM magazine ranked it as their number 3 Christian album of all time. So, for the next 2 hours, we'll be featuring rare recordings of Rich Mullins and others performing all the songs from the Liturgy album. Many of these performances were recorded live in concert, some broadcast on television, and one was even taped during an intimate gathering of Rich Mullins and friends. As always, I'll be giving background info on the recordings that we play, and hopefully providing some extra context. But once again, joining me this week will be my good friend, Chris Marchand. Chris is an author, podcaster, and Anglican priest, and he'll be taking a deeper look at the songs themselves, and sharing some reflections throughout the show. But as an added bonus, some time ago, Chris and I had the opportunity to discuss the album with 2 people that were heavily involved with its creation. Jimmy Abegg, who of course was a founding member of a Ragamuffin Band, and Reed Arvin, who produced 7 albums with Rich Mullins, the final being Liturgy. So, we'll be sharing bits of these never-before-heard conversations throughout the show. Join us for the next 2 hours as we celebrate an album that, to those who have heard it, is considered one of the greatest records of all time, Christian or otherwise. A Liturgy, A Legacy, and a Ragamuffin Band. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to our Liturgy 30th Anniversary Special. I'm Joe Cook. And, I just wanted to say that this whole thing, putting this together, has been such a labor of love for both Chris Marchand and myself. And so it's just our hope that tonight we'll be able to, in some way, capture the beauty and depth of the Liturgy album through, of course, the music that we'll be playing, but also the reflections and the conversations that you'll be hearing throughout the night. So we're going to begin with the first song from the album in a few minutes, and we're going to be joined by Chris for some of his thoughts. But I wanted to start things off tonight with a brief conversation that Chris and I had a while back with Jimmy Abegg. So we're just going to be discussing his work on the Liturgy album and a little bit about what that record means to him. So take a listen.
Where did the Ragamuffin Band come from? One year we all went up to Ichthus, which was a festival up in Kentucky. I don't know if it still exists. And I was also playing that festival with Charlie, and I think I did a Kevin Max solo. I was the guitarist with him. So I was playing with 3 different situations: Rich, Charlie, and Kevin. So when it was time to go have a smoke, we had to kind of drive off campus because he didn't want to get caught smoking. And he asked me if I would be, he's got this idea for a record called Liturgy Legacy, and he's trying to assemble a band of hand-picked people that he really loved, and was getting met with arguments from the record label because they didn't want his hand-picked band. They wanted to go 50-50. They would let him pick 3 if they could pick 3. So they picked Chris McHugh, Danny O'Lanerty on bass, Chris, of course, on drums, Danny O'Lanerty on bass, Billy Crockett on guitar, and then Rich got to pick me, Rick Elias, and Lee Lundgren to be his contribution. So they both kind of acquiesced in the middle. He was determined to get a hand-select group of friends together and make a record live in a barn. That was his dream, and that's what the Liturgy Legacy record was supposed to be, but he had to acquiesce and let Reed take it off campus. He didn't want to do it in Nashville, so we did it up in Indiana at Gaither's studio, and we were up there for, I think, a couple of weeks, and man, astonishing time. It was one of the highlights of my life to be in that room with those people for those few weeks.
Were a lot of the songs recorded live as a band, or were there a lot of overdubs, or what was the atmosphere?
No, it was, here's the way it worked. Every day, every morning would start with Rich sitting down either on guitar or piano and playing the song that we were going to attempt to record. And then we would argue about the arrangement, argue about the instrumentation, argue about everything, and by lunchtime, we would be at least recording the basic tracks. And so by the end of each day, we had one song in the can. And so every day was kind of an adventure in that way. But it's hard to say because, yes, it was all recorded live, and it was pre-digital, so it's all on tape. But there were multiple takes of things when somebody didn't get it right. But mostly, it was right out of the gate, fresh as it gets. So I think that's one of the components that makes that record so interesting. For example, at the time I didn't play mandolin, and he wanted me to play mandolin on a couple of songs, and so nobody else volunteered, so I said I would, because I'd fooled around with it on and off for years, but that was my world premiere on mandolin, and I don't know how many songs on that record I played mandolin on, but I was kind of a gifted guitar player who just suddenly found himself having to play this thing that Rich wanted, and it worked out. And I've been playing mandolin ever since. So it's that kind of push and shove motive in Rich that goes largely unknown. He would trick anybody into partnering with him on a song, for performance purposes.
With the Liturgy album, then, did Rich have a lot more input on that record than in previous records?
Oh yeah. By that time, he was a million-selling artist. He was the doggone star, as we used to say. His dressing room door always had a little cardboard star that I cut out and scotch taped to the door as a joke, because he was the doggone star. Because he really wasn't star material, but on the other hand, he was the perfect epitome of that guy that is, the A personality type. I mean, he had it all. He was an egomaniac while at the same time giving everything away. So he was a really rare human being.
Well, our sincere thanks to Jimmy Abegg for taking the time to chat with us just a little bit about A Liturgy, A Legacy, and A Ragamuffin Band. And so now, before we begin this, kind of alternate version of the Liturgy album that we'll be presenting on tonight's show, as you probably know, the album itself is split up into two parts, the Liturgy and the Legacy. But before the Liturgy portion begins, there's a song that serves as a sort of introduction. It sets the tone and perspective through which we view the rest of the album. So right now, I'm going to turn things over to my co-host for this celebration, Chris Marchand, to get some of his thoughts on the opening song, Here in America.
The introduction of the album in the liner notes from Rich Mullins and Reed Arvin ends this way. There is music you make, and there is music that makes you. Living is collaborating. The beauty of collaboration is that hopefully the end result is greater than the sum of its individual parts. The entire recording of A Liturgy, A Legacy, and A Ragamuffin Band, where Mullins first introduced the Ragamuffin Band entity, is a testament to this principle. Take the song Here in America. It begins with the band noodling around, Rick Elias admitting he's not exactly ready for this whole thing, Mullins trying to regain control of the ship as he counts off the song, and then... Well, how did you feel the first time you heard this song? Myself, I was transported. I liken it to the first time I went to Narnia. I had headphones on, the back of my car, purchased from a local Christian bookshop. I found myself enveloped, having entered a sonic soundscape unlike anything else I had ever experienced. Listening back now, I can hear it more for what it is. Drums, an accordion, acoustic guitar, a mandolin, a bass, and my favorite singer. But there's something about that collaboration, and something otherworldly about this recording. It's not just an Americana singer-songwriter folk album coming out of the Christian music industry. There's something magical going on here. We've been taken to another place. You can hear the collaboration right from the start. If you're familiar with earlier versions of Here in America, you'll realize that the Liturgy Legacy version is much slower and does not initially feature the piano. Ever the ball of energy, some of Mullins's earlier versions of the song are almost frantic and features the piano front and center. The version with the Ragamuffin Band, with Arvin at the helm, allows the song to breathe. As listeners, we've been invited into a place of contemplation. We are being gathered into worship, but to also realize we do so from a particular place. In this case, as Americans living in the United States. As the first song of the album, Here in America is the thesis statement, the root from which the album's branches spring. We worship the Holy King of Israel, but here, in America. It's the same worship as anywhere else, and yet, like worship practiced anywhere else, it contains its own beautiful idiosyncrasies. There's so much to say about this one song, but one of its main themes seems to be about transformation, namely, how the holy meets us here in the mundane, the normalcy of life, and transforms it into something sacred. The thing is, America is not Israel. We are not the chosen people. But because of Christ, we've been grafted onto the vine, and even here, in this land, far away from the promised land, we can see that God is with us. Despite the title, the song isn't actually about America all that much, though it may seem like it. Instead, it seems to be more about how anywhere we go is home, so long as God is with us, which in this case is America. But it's also about a theme prevalent in so much of Mullins's work. The idea that the normal, the familiar, the boring old physical world is in fact holy and sacred, the one place God intended to meet with us and commune with us all along.
Children gathered here to hear the secret story, and I'm glad to bring it to you with my best rhyming and rhythm. As I know the thirsty listen, and down to the waters come, and the Holy King of Israel loves me here in America. Songs, I hope you hear the water falling. I hope you feel the ocean crashing on the coasts of North New England. And I wish that I was there to see them. 2 summers past I was, and the Holy King of Israel loves me here in America. And if I were a painter, I do not know which I'd paint. The calling of the ancient stars or assembling of the saints. And there's so much beauty around us, we're just too wise to see. But everywhere I go, I'm looking. Once I went to Appalachia, my father, he was born there. And I saw the mountains in my soul, still there with them, wrapped into songs that he brought. And the Holy King of Israel holds me here in America. And I've seen on the highways on 1,000,000 exit ramps, two-legged memorials to the laws of happenstance, waiting for four-wheeled messiahs to take them home again. I'm home anywhere if you are where I am. And if you listen to my songs, I hope you hear the water falling. I hope you feel the ocean crashing on the coasts of North New England. I wish that I could be there just to see them. 2 summers past I was, and the Holy King of Israel holds me here in America.
Well, that was the earliest known recording of Here in America, the first song written for what would ultimately become the Liturgy album. And in fact, that song was written all the way back during the summer of 1976. And the recording you just heard, that was actually made by our friend Beth Snell Lutz during that very summer. In fact, she taped that in July of 1976. And right now, I'd like to read some thoughts that Beth shared about the song and recording on her Rich Mullins Early Music YouTube channel. She writes, "In the summer of 1976, Richard wrote what was always called Saints and Children, until we later called it In America, until he put it on an album and called it Here in America. Throughout, it remained unchanged, though he added wonderful instruments on the Liturgy album. My dad loved this song, so it was always on request when Richard would come to visit. This is one of those times in our living room on my mom's piano with my family gathered round." So thank you so much, Beth, for sharing that absolutely beautiful recording of Here in America. Well, before we play our next song, right now I want to share the first part of a conversation that Chris and I taped a while back with somebody we were truly honored to talk to, the producer of the Liturgy album, Reed Arvin.
Did Rich kind of have a band mentality, or I mean, early on, or was that something that as he was approaching Liturgy? How did the whole Ragamuffin Band thing come about?
The Ragamuffin Band idea was very much Rich's, because he had a group of people he was touring with, and he wanted to make a record with them. And I was okay with that to a point, and I was willing to try that. And I went out and heard them. And it seemed to me that if he wanted to make a live record, that was fine. But if he wanted to make a studio record, and I don't mean by studio some diminished version of the live record, I just mean a proper, let's go in the studio and make some magic record, as opposed to let's capture live magic record, that they wouldn't quite do. That it wouldn't hold together without the visual. If you were watching it, it was cool. But if you were just listening to it, you would start to hear how sort of it was almost falling apart some of the time. And then other times it would be brilliant, you know. So we kind of compromised, and I said, look, the most important thing to me was if we can bring in Chris to play drums. He plays with what I call a mountain of confidence. It's almost like a viral thing in the room. He just plays on this. He plays with a mountain of confidence, and everyone can coalesce around something that is just like an immovable, force. And then you can have fun around that. And so I said, let's put it together, but nothing against the guy who was playing drums for him at all, but I just felt like, and even on the bass, we kept a lot of the original bass, but I replaced some of the bass. But the idea was to get a group of people, and I brought in Billy Crockett. I felt like Billy was essential. there had to be those guys who were they were superior at what they did. They had a voice. And so I just thought, okay, let's make a band record. And the main thing is let's get out of town to make it. That's the thing. I don't think the record would have been half what it was if we'd have made it in Nashville. Yeah, we went up to Gaither's studio. Gaither had just bought the first all-digital console in the country, maybe the world, I don't know, by API. And I was eager to work on it. And he had a digital tape machine, too. They had a Sony 24 digital machine. So it was an all-digital. It was like even Sony at the Sony studios did not have that in Hollywood. They had a digital machine, but they were still working through an analog console. So I was very eager to work up there. And I drove up there, and the rooms were cool, too. And there were a lot of ISO rooms, which appealed to me so that we could record everybody at one time. And so we drove up there, and I cut a deal with everybody, a price for, I think it was maybe 8 days or 9 days. And we just went up there and cut everything except 5210, I think, which I made basically alone with the percussionist.
Eric Darkin?
Yeah, Eric and I basically made that track in a long day at the Bennett House, Keith Thomas's place. We made that in a long day, and then I did the orchestra later, and then Rich came in and sang on it. But everything else on that record was made. The tracks were done there in Indiana, and then I brought the tapes back to Nashville and did all the orchestrations. So we basically left with a record.
Well, we're going to hear more from our interview with Reed Arvin throughout the show, but right now, we're going to play the second song from the Liturgy album, 5210. And the performance we're going to be featuring tonight is from one of Rich Mullins and A Ragamuffin Band's first concerts ever. In fact, I believe it was only their second concert. And it took place at the Cornerstone Festival on July 1st, 1993. And this is actually the only known live recording of this song, 5210. But before we play that performance, here's Chris Marchand once again with his reflections on the song.
Is 5210 the strangest song in all of Mullins' canon of work? I think perhaps it is. It's a cyclical, meditative song of prayer, but it sounds more like a battle cry, a call to arms. It takes a single verse of scripture from Isaiah chapter 52, verse 10, and quotes it almost verbatim. Except even here, Mullins, who is a master at weaving the Bible into his poetry in such a way that it adapts the text and yet remains faithful to it, offers his own version of the passage, which falls somewhere between the King James Version and the New International Version. I guess this is the Mullins version. Immediately after the breezy, reflective, almost sentimental opening of Here in America, we are jolted awake by that repetitive, droning piano and the periodic loudest snare drum smacks you've ever heard. In the liner note introduction, Mullins and Arvin have let us know this is the first song of their liturgy. It's the call to worship. Perhaps it's the manifestation of a church bell ringing across the countryside with the reminder that we better get ourselves to church. Worship is starting. Labeled an introit, this is an entrance song, a processional for when the priest enters into the nave or sanctuary as worship begins. Here, Mullins is introducing the Catholic paradigm of the liturgy he's created for us. Is this a Catholic Mass we're entering into? Or Anglican or Orthodox? It certainly doesn't seem to be Quaker. Perhaps this is an ecumenical Mass where all followers of Jesus and anyone seeking him are welcome. The lyrics seem to indicate as much. Usually taken from the Psalms, introits vary from week to week, depending on the lectionary readings and the season of the church calendar. What does this week's entrance hymn invite us to meditate upon? The Lord has revealed himself, bearing his arm. Is it an arm held up in welcome? In judgment? In proclamation? That is for us to consider. But the second part of the verse is key. God has revealed himself in the sight of all the nations, and in doing so, we all shall see his salvation. Remember that relentless piano line? The one section of the song where it seems to let up for a moment and yet still continues on is in the bridge, where the payoff of the lyrics occur. God's salvation has been revealed to us. Will we receive it? Perhaps the repetition of the piano line is an audible reminder to remember this. God's salvation is ever present, hovering over us, waiting for us to respond. As we come into the house of the Lord this day, we are reminded that God has come to save us, and that this good news is for everyone. As I've gotten on in the years, one concern I've heard from many people, some of whom have left the church, the Christian faith, and others whose faith has shifted radically in their adulthood, is that growing up, they were taught to separate the spiritual from the physical. In their tradition, that which is of the spirit was good, but that which was of the flesh is bad. And thus, the people I know carry around so much guilt regarding their embodiedness and sensualness. They've been taught by word and by deed to disregard and doubt that any intrinsic goodness resides in these hollow hunks of flesh we're meant to carry around as houses for our souls. After hearing complaint after complaint about this from numerous people, I've realized that I never carried around this same guilt or tension about the physical and the spiritual. It took me a little while to realize why, but I eventually figured it out. Mullins. He was my teacher in this area. The color green is one of the primary examples of how I was shaped to not see that the physical and the spiritual were these separate things, that we needed to embrace one and reject the other. Think about this song. God made blue for the sky and the color of green for the fields. And it was good, and he made it for us, for our enjoyment, and so that we would praise him and unite with all of creation in that praise. To be alive is to be filled with thankfulness for all that God has made. Gloria in excelsis Deo. This song contains some of Mullins' most dense and layered lyrics, and as a whole is one of my favorites. I decided The Color of Green was my favorite because of this song and the music video of it directed by Steve Taylor. Notice how the song itself manages to accomplish what its lyrics point to. It is a song about bursting forth into worship, which itself births forth into worship, most especially with the long coda at the end, where we find ourselves dancing with abandon and kneeling down in reverent, contemplative awe. The whole thing just makes you want to go outside and lose yourself.
And the moon is a sliver of silver, like a shaving that fell on the floor of a carpenter's shop. Every house must have its builder. And I woke in the house of God, with the windows of mornings and evenings stretched from the sun across the sky, north to south. And on my way to early meeting, I heard the rocks crying out. I heard the rocks crying out. Be praised for all your tenderness by these works of your hands. Suns that rise and rains of Father bless and bring to life your land. Look down upon this winter weeds and be glad that you have made. Look for the sky and the color green. Fills your fields with praise. And the wrens have returned to their nesting, and the hollow of that oak where his heart once had been, he lifts up in his arms in a blessing for being born again. The streams are all swollen with winter, winter unfrozen, free to run away now. And I'm amazed as I remember who it was that built this house. And with the rocks I cry out, be praised for all your tenderness by these works of your hands. Suns that rise and rains above the blessed, bring to life your land. Look down upon this winter weeds, be glad that you have made. Blue for the sky and the color green. Be praised for all your tenderness by these works of your hands. Suns that rise and rains above the blessed, bring to life your land. Look down upon this winter weed, be glad that you have made. Blue for the sky and the color green. Fill these fields with praise.
Well, that was a tremendous live version of The Color Green that was recorded by Rich Mullins and a Ragamuffin Band at Legacy Broadcasting in South Bend, Indiana on March 14th, 1997. And I gotta tell you, I gotta confess, that might just be my favorite performance of that song, maybe even a little bit more than the album version. I just love the rawness of that performance from both Rich and the Ragamuffins. And of course, that was broadcast on the Legacy television program Live from Studio B. Okay, well, before we move on to our next song, I want to go back to our conversation with Reed Arvin and hear some of his recollections of recording the song that we just heard, The Color Green. Here's Reed.
Yeah, I have a few recollections of this, some of these songs. To me, the thing that stands out about that record, obviously, it's the first time that everything really sounds good, and everything, partly because of where we cut it, and partly because I was finally figuring out what I was doing, and also the great engineer that we used, and we had time, we had a budget. The thing that strikes me the most, that I carry the most from that record, and it's the thing that hits me the hardest with Rich being gone, is that his songwriting kept getting better. And that's the thing that gets me, is that the songs, you know, he stops putting 59 words in a 48-word space. He starts really just going to the level of artistic genius as a songwriter. And I hate that that was cut short, because that, to me, if you put that record on, just listen to it from a songwriting standpoint, I don't care who you're talking about. I don't care, YouTube, you know, anybody you want to put up, that record stands up from a songwriting standpoint, no doubt. Mm-hmm. In terms of cutting different songs, I mean, The Color Green, the reason why the reel is the same, you know, like the that part. The reason that's the same one over and over again was that I couldn't think of anything else. For some reason, Rich thought that I was some kind of Celtic music guy, which was completely false. So he was like, well, let's make up some new ones. And I was like, well, I can't remember if I thought of that one or he thought of it. But anyway, he expected me to, like, spontaneously to start riffing off on these Irish reels, you know. And I was like, Rich, you know, that's not my jam. You know? So we did the same one all the whole time. But I love the orchestra on that, you know. And that's me playing the piano at the end after we cut the track, and Chris is still playing drums and everybody else has dropped out. And I'm just having fun at the end of that. I'm just like playing kind of what comes to my mind spontaneously and sort of hoping I can find a place to land. There was no predetermined arrangement at all. You know, I'm just like kind of riffing these arpeggios and then increasing the tension and increasing the tension. And then finally I kind of just land somewhere. And then after that, I thought, you know, if I put an orchestra on that, it's going to sound like I really knew what I was doing. So that's what it was.
Well, we'll have more of our conversation with Reed Arvin in just a little bit, but first, I want to introduce the next song on the Liturgy album, and this is one that I think is certainly a favorite for many of Rich Mullins' fans. It's a song that for the past 3 decades has just always been there for us during our toughest times, and those tend to be the times when we need this song the most, and of course I'm talking about Hold Me, Jesus. And tonight we're going to play what is, in my opinion, the most unique performance of this song. For one, Rich plays it on the guitar rather than the piano it was recorded with, but overall it's just a totally different feel and arrangement altogether. But yet it is absolutely gorgeous in its own way. And the version that I'm talking about is the one that Rich played with the Kid Brothers during the famous Lufkin, Texas concert that was recorded on July 19th, 1997. But before we play the song, here's Chris Marchand with his reflection on Hold Me, Jesus.
This is the miracle of a great songwriter. They take something deeply personal to themselves and transform it into a song we can all connect with and sing along to. It's a minefield on all sides. If a song is too personal, too specific, we as listeners won't get all the references and won't be able to make the song our own. If a song's themes are too general, though, too universal, its blandness ensures it won't sink its way into our hearts. Mullins finds the perfect center in Hold Me, Jesus, and in so doing has created a modern devotional classic, a song millions of people have prayed and sung in their most desperate moments. Given the label Dona Nobis Pacem, meaning give us or grant us your peace, this prayer comes from the Eucharistic or communion prayer, Agnus Dei, the Lamb of God, which is represented later in the album during the song Peace. One of the biblical references Mullins gives to the song in the liner notes is of Elijah fleeing to the desert, afraid of the wrath of an evil king and queen. The other reference is from Matthew chapter 1, saying, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Hold Me, Jesus is a song for the weary, the anxious, the depressed, the burdened, us sinners in need of grace, all of us calling out to be released from these things we keep fighting God about that we don't really want anyway. Jesus, come to us tonight. We just need some peace.
Well, this is a song I wrote in Amsterdam because everything is legal in Amsterdam. And I always thought my folks just didn't sin because they got too old for it, but I was old enough to not sin over there. And found that it was still very tempting. And I, several years ago, I used to travel by myself, and I traveled by myself for several years in a row, and I had a lot of struggles at the time because it's just so hard not to watch those movies, you know, in those hotel rooms when you're when you're alone. And I was talking to a spiritual director of mine, and he said, well, it's not that you're so bad, it's just you're not supposed to go out by yourself. And so I started traveling with other people, and when we were in Amsterdam, it was me and Beaker. I don't know if you remember Beaker or not. So I was there in the hotel room hoping that he would start snoring so I could be sure he was asleep. Because I thought, well, maybe it'd just be fun to take a walk and be tempted. Because sometimes, even if you're not going to sin, it's nice to be tempted. And he never did snore that night. And by about 5 in the morning, I was pretty worn out. And that's when I wrote this prayer, and if you want to pray it with me, you can.
As a musical piece, creed should not have worked. Labeled credo, a creed is a statement of belief. And the text, apart from the refrain of the song, draws entirely from the Apostles' Creed. The longer, more developed and theologically complex Nicene Creed is the more widely used in worship of these ancient declarations of the tenets of the Christian faith. As a way of describing the impact of this song, the story I like to tell is my own. There I was, just a kid, 11 or 12 years old, listening to this song on cassette for the first time, utterly gobsmacked, as the British say. I was left wondering, how did Mullins find a way to fit every essential belief of the Christian faith into just one song? Where does he come up with this stuff? Well, it was a few years later when I somehow came in contact with the creeds of the faith. I have to admit, I felt a bit stupid, but also angry. I grew up an evangelical Pentecostal, and although we had a strong foundation of the scriptures, anything regarding early church history or that came close to sounding Roman Catholic was either ignored or consciously forbidden, and therefore the creeds never mentioned at all. But I think Mullins did something incredible with this song. I'm not sure, but I think it was subversive. At least I like to think it was. He knew his audience. He knew most of them would be just like me and have no idea the creeds existed at all. This was his way of exposing us sheltered evangelicals to the broader faith, both historically and geographically. Unknowingly, us Protestants had just been invited into the ancient church, the faith once delivered for all the saints. But like I said, the song shouldn't have worked at all. To start with, the lyrics are not exactly poetic and are difficult to match to music. Along with that, the basic chord structure of the song is almost too simple. In my younger days, I attempted to lead the song a few times in church worship, and much to my disappointment, it just never seemed to work. No one ever got as passionate about it as I did. Maybe this is a testament to the power of a performance and the mystery of crafting a song in the recording studio. From Mullins' masterful, never-wavering dulcimer part, to Arvin's majestic orchestration and finely punctuated piano, to Chris McHugh and Eric Darkin's impeccable and surprising percussion, the song, like so much on this album, transforms the mundane into the sublime. But there's another surprise in this song. In a stroke of genius, Mullins adds his own lyrics in the chorus, a kind of commentary on the creed, and in so doing quotes G.K. Chesterton from Orthodoxy, one of his favorite books. Notice the beautifully paradoxical nature of the refrain. Mullins declares, "What I believe makes me what I am. However, what I believe I did not make. No, it is making me." This is God's truth. We're simply living into it. As a young person, the beauty of this song is that I felt invited into this faith. This wasn't some kind of truth that left me feeling inadequate or with some kind of inaccessible peak to climb. This was a joyous mystery. This was life itself. And the song Creed was the threshold, beckoning me to enter.
I believe in God the Father, Almighty maker of heaven and maker of earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only begotten Son, our Lord. He was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate. He was crucified and dead and buried, and I believe what I believe is what makes me what I am. Well, I did not make it, no, it is making me. It's the very truth of God, not the invention of any man.
who suffered, who was crucified, buried, and dead. He ascended into heaven. On the third day, he rose again. He ascended into heaven, where he sits at God's mighty right hand. I believe that he's returning. He'll judge the quick and the dead of the sons of men. And I believe what I believe is what makes me what I am. Well, I did not make it. No, it is making me. It is the very truth of God, not the invention of any man. And I believe it. I believe it. And I believe it. I believe it. I believe it, I believe it. I believe in God the Father, Almighty maker of heaven, maker of earth. And in Jesus Christ, his only begotten Son, who is our Lord. I believe in the Holy Spirit, one holy church, communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins. I believe in the resurrection. I believe that life will never end. And I believe what I believe is what makes me what I am. Well, I did not make it. No, it is making me. I said I did not make it. No, it is making me. I said I did not make it. No, it is making me. It is the very truth of God, not the invention of any man. I believe it. 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 Lord, I believe.
Well, that was another performance from 1997 right there, recorded in April of that year at Wheaton College during an appearance on their television program, The Exchange. That was Rich Mullins along with Mitch McVicker performing the classic liturgy anthem, Creed. Well, we're going to hear from Chris Marchand again in just a few minutes, but first, let's go back to our conversation with Reed Arvin to hear a little bit about their approach to recording the Liturgy album, and we're also going to hear some of his memories of working with Jimmy Abegg on that record, as well as some of his thoughts on the song that you just heard, Creed. Once again, here's Reed Arvin.
What we would do was we would meet at 10 o'clock in the morning, and Rich would play everybody the song. And obviously, I'd heard them, but they hadn't heard them before. And everybody would gather around the piano, and he would play everybody the song. Most of them were hearing for the first time. And then I would send people off in twos. And you'd get your own room, and you'd work until lunch as a duo. And then everybody came back after lunch, but right before lunch, and everybody played everybody else their version. So you'd have a hand percussionist and a dulcimer, or you'd have a bass player and a piano player, or a drummer and a guitar player. And then just different stuff would come out that way. We never played as a group until the afternoon. So people would come up with cool stuff because there wasn't anything else going on, so they kind of had a chance to think really freely. Mm-hmm. And then we would we'd either pick a winner, oh, that's obviously cool, that's the one, or we kind of piece it together, and then we would cut the track that afternoon and then overdub on it that night.
And the recording session was about 8 days long?
Yeah, I think it was about 8 days, and we cut maybe 9 tracks in the 8 days.
Okay.
Obviously, we didn't do 52-10, and maybe there's one other we didn't do. I can't remember how many tracks. There might be 12 songs on that record. Maybe we got 10 in 9 days or something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how we did the record. That's the main thing, yeah. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of fun. one of my favorite moments was I called Jimmy Abegg. I didn't know Jimmy very well, but Rich wanted him to be on the record, and I was like, and the only thing I'd heard of his was a record he made with Charlie Peacock, which was really, really cool, which turned out to be not representative of Jimmy's playing at all. It was representative of Charlie Peacock. But Jimmy made some really beautiful contributions to that record in any case. But I called him and I said, hey, we're going up to Indiana and love for you to come up and spend the time with us. And, you know, we're bunking in this hotel. We're going to make this record. Do you want to be a part of it? And I said it was in Indiana. And his first question was, is it in a dry county? Not how much does it pay or, you know, how many days. But
Priorities.
I don't know the answer to that question. I said, I don't know. I'm going to find out. And it turned out that it was in a dry county.
It was in a dry county?
Yes, but the next county over was not, which was not very far away.
Yeah.
So I said, all right. He's a great guy, and I got nothing but love for Jimmy, man. He's, you know, of that crowd, I'm not speaking out of school to say that I'm not super popular with a lot of the Rich Mullins hardcore people. But Jimmy's heart is so big. He was very gracious and very generous to me. I never forgot it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I think one of the most iconic aspects of Mullins' career is the dulcimer. And so, like, his dulcimer on Creed, it just, it still blows me away.
I can tell you on that he cut it in one take.
Really?
Yeah. I called him OTR. That was my nickname for him. OTR, one take Rich. He was fantastically precise while playing the dulcimer because, and I think the reason is that it's so physical when you're playing it. It's like playing a drum. So he played perfect time when playing the dulcimer, which was really cool.
We'll return to our interview with Reed Arvin later on in the program, but for now, we're going to move on to the next song on the Liturgy album. And this is the final song on the Liturgy portion of the record. And of course, I'm talking about the song Peace. Well, as you know, here on Ragamuffin Archive Revisited, we like to dive into our archives and beyond to play rare and unique versions of Rich's songs. Sometimes they're demos, but often they're live recordings. But one interesting thing about the song Peace is that there is no known complete live recording of the song out there. I mean, it may exist, but we haven't found it. And it's actually kind of sad to me because it's probably the song that we've had more requests for over the years than any other. Now, there is an incomplete recording that surfaced a few years back, but it's just a minute or so, and so there's no known full performance available. So tonight, we're going to feature a live performance of the song from another artist, a guy who considers Rich Mullins to be one of his influences, Andy Gullahorn. Andy actually covered this song for the soundtrack of the movie Ragamuffin, but tonight, we're going to play his performance from a tribute concert that Andrew Peterson hosted at the historic Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, Tennessee, back on September 24th, 2017. That night, Peterson assembled a huge band to play the Liturgy album in its entirety, note for note. And as you'll hear during Andy Gullahorn's performance of Peace, they did a pretty amazing job. But before we hear that performance, here's Chris Marchand to share his thoughts on the song Peace.
The Agnus Dei, Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world, have mercy on us. Lamb of God, who takes away the sins of the world, have mercy on us. Lamb of God, who takes away the sins of the world, grant us your peace. I find it nearly impossible to name my favorite Rich Mullins song. Is it If I Stand? Sometimes By Step? The Just Shall Live? Boy Like Me, Man Like You? Calling Out Your Name? With the Wonder? Sing Your Praise to the Lord? Hard to Get? All the Way to Kingdom Come? My One Thing? On and on it goes. I have no idea. The problem with A Liturgy, A Legacy, and A Ragamuffin Band is that basically 2/3 of the album are my favorite Rich Mullins songs. But every now and then I feel I can definitively say that Peace is my favorite. That piano intro section is stunning. I tried to learn how to play it once, but I'm just not that good. By the way, for an Americana folk record, I think it should be acknowledged just how many great hooks there are on this album, and this song has one of the best. From a lyrical standpoint, this song contains everything. There is so much longing to make things right, so much acknowledgement of brokenness within ourselves and between those we care about. We love each other and still somehow remain strangers to each other. But there is an answer to all this struggle. Come and join the feast. Come to the Lord's table. Partake of his body and blood, poured out for the life of the world. We live in a world of scarcity of resources, scarcity of love. But at the Lord's table is abundance. There we are all welcomed in and cared for. Toward the end of his life, Mullins was noted as saying he longed for the Eucharist. Now, he was saying this as a non-Catholic, perhaps moving toward being confirmed in the Catholic Church. But to me, debating whether he was joining a certain branch of the faith or not is missing the point. You see, the theme of the album is that we meet God right here, in this physical world, and the greatest means by which this takes place on earth is through communion. God meets us and fills us with the bread and the wine. Communion is everything. It reminds us why Christ came, and it reconciles us to God and to each other. It binds up our brokenness. It offers us true unity, forgiveness, and transcendence. And it's all right here in this 4-minute song. Yes, yes, may peace rain down from heaven.
Drown
That was Andy Gullahorn live at the Ryman Auditorium back in 2017 performing the song Peace. And I'd like to take a moment to thank Bill and Betsy Lewis for graciously sending me that recording. I had been looking all over for a copy of Andy performing that song that night, and I just couldn't find it anywhere. But thankfully, Betsy had the great foresight to record it, and she and her husband Bill were able to get it to me just in time to include it in tonight's broadcast. So thank you guys so much. Well, that's going to conclude the liturgy portion of this special celebration of the 30th anniversary of A Liturgy, A Legacy, and A Ragamuffin Band. But before we move on to the legacy part of the album, we're going to briefly go back to our interview with producer Reed Arvin and hear how making this record differed from the other 6 albums that he made with Rich Mullins. Let's listen.
How did just the overall experience of recording Liturgy compare to you with the previous records?
Well, it was completely different because we were out of town. It was a lot of fun. There was more. You asked earlier about pressure. That's the only record where I felt a lot of pressure. Not from the label, but because we were out of town and spending all the money in 9 days. I mean, if you load the circus up and you take it somewhere, you're talking about trucks, man. Everybody's gear. You have cartage to Indiana, not to, the studio across town. Mm-hmm. You have hotel rooms. You have per diems. You have really expensive studio time. You have a very expensive engineer, which I wasn't going to compromise on in that situation, blocked out for 9 days of 24/7, because I don't know when we're going to stop. So I did have the feeling, man, we better bring back a record, because if we don't bring back a record, I don't know what we're going to do, because we are shooting the moon on this. But it worked out, so it was fine. But yeah, the sensation was completely different. I had a lot of fun doing it, and it made me want to go back and make all the other records that way. Mm. But of course, you learn as you go. I'm sure if you were to get a great filmmaker in, not to compare myself with a great filmmaker, but anybody who's been at something for a long time, you would love to know what you know at the end, at the beginning. It's just natural.
Well, let's move on to the legacy portion of the album, which begins with the only instrumental track that Rich Mullins released during his lifetime, a song called 78 Eatonwood Green. Now, Rich often joked that this was an Irish song because he and Beaker wrote the song in Ireland, and it was famously named for the address of the house where they stayed there. The performance we're going to hear tonight wasn't recorded in Ireland, but it was recorded in Europe during a concert that aired on television in Holland back in 1994. It's a great acoustic performance of the song from Rich and Beaker. But first, here's Chris Marchand once again with his reflection on 78 Eatonwood Green.
I teach literature and history to middle and high schoolers, and I often try to teach the work of J.R.R. Tolkien, one of my favorite authors. Though a prolific writer and translator, in many ways, Tolkien really only published 2 prominent works of fiction in his lifetime. You know them, The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings. And thus, a game I often like to play with my students is to imagine what other books we wish Tolkien had written about Middle-earth. Rich Mullins fans often like to do the same thing with his music. And 78 Eatonwood Green offers us a perfect opportunity to ask, what if, about Mullins? One of the perennial questions people ask about him is, what do you think Rich Mullins would have been doing if he were alive today? This is a wonderfully perplexing question, but I often like to ask it another way. What Rich Mullins albums did we never get to hear? What albums do we hope he would have eventually made? I think this is an excellent game to play. It's fun to dream, and it's also helpful to lament what could have been in order to allow ourselves to be sad about what he was not able to do within his lifetime. And in so doing, learn contentment for what we were never given. Would he have made a country record like he admitted to wanting to do for quite some time during the release of Brother's Keeper and the older song, Promenade? Supposedly, after the Jesus record, he wanted to make a worship-oriented album with Reed Arvin again at the helm. And what would be on your list? A singer-songwriter record of essentially secular songs? How about a solo instrumental piano album, perhaps of various hymn arrangements? Would he have done another musical at some point? Well, 78 Eatonwood Green offers us a tantalizingly unrealized what-if in the form of a Ragamuffin Band Celtic instrumental album. Yeah, you want to listen to that too, right? I had this idea almost from the very moment I heard the song. This should be a whole album, I thought. I want to hear Mullins' Celtic album. And I still do. He loved the band The Chieftains, and I imagine if given enough time and encouragement, he would have tried his hand at an album in this genre. What we're left with, though, is this brief masterpiece and wondering what might have been. It's a beautiful thought, thinking he might still be working on it somewhere, and that one day, sometime, in some place, we might all get to hear it. I can only hope.
Well, we'll play a bit more hammered dulcimer music for you. This is off of the new album, and it's called 78 Eatonwood Green, which is the name of the place we stayed in Ireland, in Dublin. And it was not a particularly beautiful place, but it was very hospitable, so we named the song after it.
Rich Mullins always made a point to write about common folk. Following after Jesus wasn't for the high and mighty, but regular people struggling to get by, barely able to make it through the day without losing it on somebody. In Hard, the true second half of the album, after the palate cleanser of 78 Eatonwood Green, Mullins turns himself into one of these normal folk. He's singing for himself this time, and he does it by quoting the Sermon on the Mount. Mullins was always an enigma. Many viewed him as a saint, but he sure did admit to a lot of sinning. People loved him and were drawn to him, and yet many said he could really turn on you. He could be selfish and petty, catatonic in his depression and devastating in his rage. Boy, oh boy, was he a bad dude sometimes. It sure is hard to be like Jesus. A lot of ragamuffin talk continues to swirl around Mullins, and Brennan Manning, one of his major influences. With many people, I see them looking at Mullins and themselves as a way of being able to say, see, we're all sinners, we all mess up, as if that was the end of the story. The thing is, I never saw Mullins making excuses or letting himself off the hook for the damaging things he did. I saw him struggle to believe God actually loved him, and I saw him keep striving to follow after Jesus with all of his being, even if Jesus was often hard to get. Hard is one of his gospel-tinged songs, a genre of church music with lots of longing and crying out to the Lord. Mullins cites Matthew 19 in the liner notes, a passage that contains Jesus welcoming the little children, followed by the rich man who could not give up his possessions and went away sad. After this, perplexed, the disciples ask Jesus, "Who then can be saved?" Jesus' answer seems to be speaking directly to Mullins' winking lament in this song. It sure is hard to follow Jesus. Yeah, well, with man this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible.
Well, I am a good Midwestern boy. I give an honest day's work when I can get it. I don't cheat on my taxes. I don't cheat on my girl. I got values that would make the White House jealous. I took it a little much over-impressed to think of Peter and Paul and the Apostle. I don't stand up too well against them, I guess, but by the standards around here, I ain't doing that awful. Well, it's hard to turn the other cheek, hard to bless when others curse you. Well, Lord, it's hard to be a man of peace, Lord, it's hard. Lord, it's hard. Lord, it's hard. Well, Lord, it's hard to be like Jesus. Don't you know that it's hard? Lord, it's hard. Lord, it's hard. Well, Lord, it's hard to be like Jesus. And it's hard to step out on them ways, hard to walk beyond your vision. Oh Lord, it's hard to be a man of faith. Lord, it's hard. Lord, it's hard. Lord, it's hard. Oh Lord, it's hard to be like Jesus. Don't you know that it's hard? Lord, it's hard. Lord, it's hard. Oh Lord, it's hard to be like Jesus. With his eyes on the sparrow and the lilies of the field I've heard. And he will watch over you, and he will watch over me, so we can dress like flowers and eat like birds. Lord, it's hard when your faith has been stripped bare, hard to raise your eyes toward heaven. Oh Lord, it's hard to be a man of prayer. Lord, it's hard. Lord, it's hard. Lord, it's hard. Lord, it's hard to be like Jesus. Lord, it's hard. Lord, it's hard. Lord, it's hard. Oh Lord, it's hard to be like Jesus. Well, I am a good Midwestern boy. I've given honest day's work when I can get it. I don't cheat on my taxes. I don't cheat on my girl. I've got values that would make the White House jealous.
Well, that was a pretty rare recording right there. In fact, that's the only live recording known to exist of Rich Mullins performing his song Hard. And that was taped at the old Whittier Fine Arts Building at Friends University in Wichita, Kansas, back on April 3rd, 1993. And Rich was backed up on that particular rendition by some of his classmates at Friends, a vocal group called Cananiah. And a video of that performance is available to watch on the YouTube channel of one of Cananiah's members, Rich's friend, Kevin Brockseek. Well, the next song on the Liturgy album is yet another track where we don't actually have any live recordings of Rich Mullins performing the song at all. In fact, unlike the song Peace, there's not even a partial recording of this one out there, at least not that we know of anyway. And of course, I'm talking about the song I'll Carry On. So, we thought tonight we'd play yet another cover version from that incredible Liturgy tribute concert that took place at the Ryman Auditorium back in 2017. And this time it's Jeremy Casella singing I'll Carry On. So we're going to play that performance as well as get Chris Marchand's thoughts on the song in just a moment. But first, producer Reed Arvin actually attended that Liturgy tribute concert. And so here are some of his reflections on that night.
So, Andrew Peterson did this incredible live concert at the Ryman, and it was an amazing experience. It was one of the greatest nights of my life. I had no idea when the concert happened and the I sat down with Andrew. He asked me what I thought about doing it because he'd gone to see. There's a band here in town that was doing the Paul Simon record, Graceland live, note for note, and it was really great. And so he said, "Well, how would you feel about doing Liturgy and Legacy that way? Just play the record down, note for note." And I said, "Well, I think it's a cool idea because it's never been heard. Because that's not how you make a record. So no one has ever actually heard live that record. But I think you should do it at the Exit Inn or some little. And there's no way that hundreds and hundreds of people would want to go listen to you play that record down." And he said, "Well, I think you're wrong." And it turned out he was right. And so they put it in the Ryman, and he sent me a text. He said, "Well, I think we sold 1,200 tickets the first maybe day and a half or something, or over the weekend, And they could easily have added a second night, but it wasn't available. So that's when I realized I honestly did not know. Sounds probably dorky to guys like you, but I was not aware of the depth of affection for that music. I knew it had some affection, but I was not aware to the extent. So then when I went in to help them with the concert, and that's what I gave them their string arrangements. So they had live strings there at the concert and everything. And then they learned the record note for note. And they played the crap out of it, man. And I even went out and played. I played on Creed, I think. Mm-hmm. And even that night of the concert, it wasn't a celebration of Rich Mullins. And it was specifically portrayed that way. This is a celebration about this music. People who love this music to come together and love this music together in the same room on a given night.
Thank you, Reed. Now, in a moment, we're going to hear singer-songwriter Jeremy Casella, along with all the musicians that Andrew Peterson assembled for that Liturgy tribute concert, performing the song "I'll Carry On." But first, here's Chris Marchand with his thoughts on the song.
Is it an American virtue to see ourselves as lone wolves? Is our highest ideal to be a self-made person, where no one but the individual can take credit for any success? Are we these autonomous entities with no connections to the past or future, owing nothing to no one and only living in the moment till the end of our days? From the liner notes, Mullins cites 2 Timothy, chapter 1, verses 3 through 6, which reads, "I thank God whom I serve, as my ancestors did. With a clear conscience, as night and day I constantly remember you in my prayers. Recalling your tears, I long to see you, so that I may be filled with joy. I am reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and, I am persuaded, now lives in you also. For this reason, I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands." The longer we live in faith, the more we realize that it's all passed on and shared from person to person. We did not make this faith. No, it is making us. And it made our mothers and fathers too. Then, if we carry on, we'll eventually pass those songs and even those scars to the generation after us. The song could have been written from Mullins' perspective, but the verses indicate something else. Is the narrator in the song Timothy writing to his mother, the catalyst for his faith? Or is the song written by an immigrant coming to America, leaving his homeland, saying goodbye to his loved ones, and making a pledge to his mother to carry on the faith? The true answer may be interesting, but in some ways it hardly matters. The song represents all of our stories. Every single one of us has had to grow up, leave our homes, and strike out into the world, pondering how we'll be faithful, or not, to what our elders handed down to us as we put down roots in search for a new home.
Mama, I've got 2 strong hands, and they're fine as forest hands go. I can shoulder the future, I can brave the wind for the dream that I must follow. It's a dream that can kill with its beauty, it's a hurt that can heal with its pain. And with all of these miles that lies before me, I may never get home again. So I'll carry songs of when we were kids, I'll carry scars pray for you always, and I promise you this, I'll carry on, I'll carry on. Kiss the earth from my daddy's grave, say goodbye to my graveyard companions. When they hoist that sail, I know my heart will break, as bright as fine as the morning. I don't know where this road will take me, but they say there's a place there for a man, and I'm only afraid that the dreams may betray, and I'll never get home again. I'll carry the songs I learned when we were kids. I'll carry the scars of generations gone by. I'll pray for you always, and I promise you this, I'll carry on, I'll carry on. And oh, I can shoulder the future, and I can brave the wind. Oh, we go on, but we never get home again. So I'll carry the songs I wrote when we were kids. I'll carry the scars of generations gone by. I'll pray for you always, and I promise you this, I'll carry on, I'll carry on. And I'll carry the songs I wrote when we were kids. I'll carry the scars of generations gone by. I'll pray for you always, and I promise you this, I'll carry on. And I'll carry the songs I wrote when we were kids. I'll carry the scars of generations gone by. I'll pray for you always, and I promise you this, I'll carry on. And I'll carry the songs I wrote when we were kids. I'll carry the scars of generations gone by. I'll pray for you always, and I promise you this, I'll carry on. Carry the song, carry the song. Oh, carry the scars, oh, I pray for you always, and I promise you this, I'll carry on. Oh, carry the song, carry the song. Oh, carry the song, carry the song. And I pray for you always, and I promise you this, I'll carry on.
Well, that was Jeremy Casella from the big Liturgy concert at the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville back in September 2017, singing I'll Carry On. And I want to take a quick moment to thank the Rich Mullins fan who recorded that performance. Thank you so much to Dale Robson for allowing us to play that on tonight's show. Well, you're listening to a Ragamuffin Archive Revisited celebration of the 30th anniversary of the Liturgy album. And our next song is certainly unique. And not only for this album, I mean, it's the only Christmas song that Rich Mullins released during his entire career. And we also have a truly unique performance of that song that we're going to be featuring on tonight's show. And I'm going to share more about that in just a moment, but first, here's Chris Marchand to share his thoughts on the song, You Gotta Get Up.
I have heard that some people don't like the song You Gotta Get Up, that it's too cute or trite or out of place on the album. Well, I think that title belongs to another song, which we'll get to soon enough, but in general, I simply don't understand these reactions. You Gotta Get Up is a gem of a song, if only for its gloriously earwormy piano line. How can you deny a riff like that? And you've got to give Mullins props for composing a new melody that instantly sounds like a Christmas classic. To be young is to see the world as a playground of anticipation. And what can be more exciting than Christmas morning? The kid in the song, is it you? Is it me? Is it Mullins? Can hardly contain him or herself. It's a snapshot of pure joy. The song defies expectations. It doesn't quite play the CCM game as people want it to. Sure, it mentions the baby born in Bethlehem, but did he have to make the rest of it seem so secular? Couldn't there be a more straightforward gospel message? I often became pretty frustrated with Christian radio, who for some reason rarely played this song around the holidays, despite it being so catchy and as sentimental as any Hallmark film. It's one of the many industry injustices neglectfully doled out onto Mullins' music. But maybe that's okay. Those of us who love it know it's a classic, even if only in our hearts. How's that for sentimental?
Thanks, Chris. Well, I think this might be the most interesting and certainly different performance that we'll be featuring on tonight's program. For those who don't know, Rich Mullins wrote the song You Gotta Get Up back in 1979. In fact, he wrote it for a Christmas concert that he played that winter with his group Zion at the Jesus House in Cincinnati. Well, here is the performance from that night, courtesy of the Rich Mullins Early Music YouTube channel. And you'll definitely hear some similarities to the final version, but it's also drastically different to the song that most of us know. Here it is, the way Rich Mullins originally wrote it, his Christmas song, You Gotta Get Up. Enjoy.
What I want you to do is imagine a little tin soldier. Imagine that your father is Hans Christian Andersen. And that he brought home a little steadfast tin soldier. And you use it on him every Christmas to get him up. And that's what this song is about. Ready? Go. That was a practice. Santa came down the chimney last night, boys, and he filled them stockings up with lots of Christmas toys. And you gotta get up, you gotta get up, you gotta get up. It's Christmas morning. Last night I heard reindeers on the roof. You may think I'm exaggerating, but I'm telling the truth. So you gotta get up, you gotta get up, you gotta get up. It's Christmas morning. Wake up, mama, shake up, dad. Go make Sam the best eggnog you ever had. Did I get my electric train? Did my sister get it all? It's 4:30 Christmas morning, so get up and that's all. Mom and Daddy stayed up too late last night. I guess they got carried away in the Christmas candlelight. They gotta get up, they gotta get up, they gotta get up. It's Christmas morning. And I heard reindeers up on my roof. You may think I'm exaggerating, but I swear I'm telling you the truth. So you gotta get up, you gotta get up, you gotta get up. It's Christmas morning. Wake up, mama, wake up, my dad. Go make Sam the best eggnog he ever had. Did I get my electric train? Did my sister get it all? It's 5 o'clock Christmas morning, so get up and that's all.
Rich Mullins at the Jesus House in Cincinnati back in 1979, playing a song that he had just written for the occasion, an early version of You Gotta Get Up. And you know, during our interview with Reed Arvin, Chris and I had the chance to talk with him about some of those early versions of songs that eventually found their way on to the Liturgy album. So, let's hear what he had to say.
It's also the only record of his to have a Christmas song on it.
Yeah, and everybody always bitches about that. I mean, Andrew Peterson was giving a major stick on that. He said, he assumed that the label had insisted that we put a Christmas record on so that there would be a Christmas song, And I said, no way, man. He played that song. I thought it was charming. And I wanted to put it on the record. Nobody told us to put it on the record. I thought it was charming. I love it.
You know what? I think that's the benefit of... I heard that song when I was a kid. I was not cynical. I saw it as sincere. It meant a lot to me, that song did.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
Yeah, I love that song.
It wasn't that, let's make a Christmas record in June, so we strewed, where you put up the Christmas lights and you try to get in the mood. It wasn't that at all. We just had fun with it.
That one, and I think Here in America, were both written sometime in like the mid to late 70s. Did you know that at the time?
No. Wow. Well, I can kind of believe that about Here in America, because Here in America, it does feel older in a way, because it's more political, and it's more, but man, if he was writing that in the 70s, that's because that lyric is...
Was that anything that he ever talked with you about? Because we kind of have looked back at his records. He places an old song here and there almost on all the records. And it's kind of funny because it's like a surprise. He doesn't tell anybody.
No, I never knew that. You guys are much more knowledgeable about that than I am.
Yeah.
I don't know the history of when songs... All I know is that he would bring in songs. That's all I know. As far as I knew, they had just been finished. Mm-hmm. And plus, mostly I heard them played live. I didn't hear, he'd play them on guitar badly, or he'd play them on piano pretty well. Mm-hmm. But that's when, and I believe I heard Here in America, I think actually he played it on guitar. Mm. And so as far as I was concerned, he'd just written it. So I did not know that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and from the original version to what ended up on the album, I mean, musically and lyrically, I think it's pretty much identical to recordings he made of it in the 70s. You Gotta Get Up was very different.
I've never heard these demos just as well, Yeah, Here in America, that is probably a song where he had a heavier hand because, as I recall, he did insist on the accordion, which I guess must have been on the original, if you say it's really similar.
I guess I mean lyrically and melodically.
Oh. Yeah, that I could tell you, because I've never heard any of those earlier recordings. I never heard any earlier recordings of any Rich songs to the extent that they were proper recordings. I heard a handful of demos, but no more than 8 or 9 of those in all the records combined. What I heard was him in a room play the song. So I don't really have any frame of reference for how those records or recordings would have gone.
Well, we'll conclude our interview with Reed Arvin in a bit, but right now we're going to move on from one unique song to another. Our next song is the only song on the Liturgy album that was not written or co-written by Rich Mullins. In fact, it's one of only a few cover songs released during his entire career. Of course, I'm talking about Rich's cover of How to Grow Up Big and Strong, a song that Mark Hurd wrote and released in 1987 on his Ideola project Tribal Opera, and that had already been covered in 1988 by none other than Olivia Newton-John. But following Mark's untimely passing in 1992, Rich decided to cover the song and he included it on the Liturgy album. And tonight, we're going to play a live version of the song that Rich and a few of the Ragamuffins, Rick Elias, Jimmy Abegg, and Phil Madeira, performed acoustic to open a Mark Hurd tribute concert at the Cornerstone Festival back on July 2nd, 1994. But first, here's Chris Marchand to share his thoughts on How to Grow Up Big and Strong and its inclusion on the Liturgy album.
How do we reconcile the ugly sides of our heritage with that which we love about our heritage? What do we do with the dysfunctional family systems that shaped us into the traumatized adults we are today? Can we honestly call ourselves a people of peace when so much of our history is shaped by violence, hatred, and an unwillingness to address a multitude of shared atrocities committed in the name of considering ourselves a Christian nation? Though the inclusion of How to Grow Up Big and Strong has always perplexed me, and to this day, I believe its sonic texture simply does not fit on the album. It's in an attempt to answer these conflicting questions that I believe Mullins decided to include this Mark Hurd song as found on one of his all-time favorite albums, Ideola. Written with intentional, punchy fragments, the language seems to want to evoke a caveman aesthetic. I strong, you weak, I crush you. It's a meditation on the ways of the world. We are forever raising up our children, especially the men, to be agents of warfare, domination, vengeance. We take no prisoners. Strong men show no mercy. This is how we help them grow up big and strong. Yes? Note the bitter irony of the last verse, which perverts the words of Isaiah the prophet. We melt the plowshares and turn them into swords. Something seems off, doesn't it? In America, we think we're followers of Jesus, by default. But maybe we're not actually following in the way of the Master after all. Maybe we've deceived ourselves. But maybe we've fallen into the same trap as all the other civilizations before us. We thought we were supposed to establish a new kingdom, and all along the kingdom of God is something different. This song makes the most sense when you imagine the opposite of what it's trying to convey. We are to become everything it is pointing away from. We are to love, to embrace, to let others be, to not take or conquer, to be people of peace. This is how we are really to teach our children to grow up big and strong.
Now, without further ado, we're going to start this off with Rich Mullins and the Ragamuffins. I hope you don't mind, wrote the lyrics out. You don't mind screwing up your own words, but be careful of those people. He drowned stars, guided by the mission of 1,000 wars. He fit and dominant, and I wonder why he the battle cry. Strong man is survivor, he lived to pound little wooden crosses in the bloody ground. He fits in dominance, he stand a chance, he not by the circumstance. And the world keep on turning, and the sun keep on burning, and the children keep learning how to grow up big and strong.
Rich Mullins and the Ragamuffins performing How to Grow Up Big and Strong during a Mark Hurd tribute concert at Cornerstone 94, and that recording is courtesy of our friend Scott Hansen. Check out the full concert on Scott's YouTube channel. Well, for the past couple hours, you've been listening to Ragamuffin Archive Revisited, a celebration of the 30th anniversary of the Liturgy album, and we've just about reached the end of the record. But before we play the final song, we have some final thoughts on A Liturgy, A Legacy, and a Ragamuffin Band from the producer himself, Reed Arvin.
I really appreciate you sharing that about not, I guess, being aware of the affection for that album. I think if you took a poll of Rich Mullins fans, that album, leaps and bounds for most of us, is above everything else. And just on a personal note, thank you. Abbey Road is my second favorite album.
Oh, man, come on, man.
It is what it is, man.
Well, yeah, I've had people tell me that, and I have no way to process that because I ain't no George Martin, Sir George Martin. He's passed away, but he still deserves to serve more than anybody. Yeah, people tell me that. But I have to admit, it's been very gratifying to hear because you feel like all of us really want to do something that stands up, that lasts. And that's been my motivation. So thank you for saying that. It's wind in my sails. Every time somebody says that to me, I really appreciate it.
I think, in our conversations, one of the things we don't know what to do about is Liturgy Legacy. It's relegated to the CCM ghetto. And so we're trying to think, how do we preserve the conversation, that this music? There's not much we can do about it. But outside of our bubble, this music isn't really talked about, even though for us, it blew our worlds apart when we were kids or whatever. It really did.
It's not on the Rolling Stone list of 200 best records, right?
It's not.
But yeah, you're saying it's your top record.
Absolutely.
Because they've never heard it. They've never, That doesn't bother me. I appreciate it if you guys want to make that your cause. I think it's great. But it's exceeded, I'm sure, Rich and my expectations already. We're already well into the atmosphere of wow. Doesn't need to do anything else for me to be well satisfied. I do think you're right. There is a certain opaqueness regarding it in the broader culture. They don't see it. It's not visible to them. Maybe they would like it if they heard it. That doesn't personally bother me. I don't think it would bother Richie. Although he was more complicated about that than you think. He had a love-hate relationship with Seth. There's no doubt. It wasn't all hate.
Well, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Man, I really enjoyed it.
All right.
Peace out.
Peace out.
Well, our sincere thanks to Reed Arvin as well as Jimmy Abegg for taking their time with us to reflect on this incredible album, A Liturgy, A Legacy, and a Ragamuffin Band. And of course, my thanks to Chris Marchand for all of his hard work in helping me put tonight's show together. And last but not least, I want to thank all of you for joining us for this special look back on the Liturgy album. I'll be back next week at 9 p.m. Eastern for an all-new episode of Ragamuffin Archive Revisited. But in the meantime, we have one final song, Land of My Sojourn. The version we'll be closing our show with tonight is a great performance from Rich and Beaker, recorded on February 12th, 1994 at Legacy Broadcasting in South Bend, Indiana. But before we play the song, I'm going to turn things over to Chris one last time so that he can share his thoughts on Land of My Sojourn. Have a great night.
Notice how much of Mullins' work contains some kind of longing for home. I think he hoped to point to a restlessness that should be present in all of us. We want to be home, our real home. We want to dwell at peace in the promised land. The beauty of Land of My Sojourn is that America both is and is not our promised land. Nobody tells you when you're born here how much you'll come to love it and how you'll never belong here. So I'll call you my country, but I'm lonely for my home, and I wish that I could take you there with me. We can love our country, but we also need to realize this is not our final stop. To be a sojourner is to always be a foreigner, a traveler, always searching for a place to lay our head. In many ways, this is certainly the most American-themed song on the album. It's a road song, a coming to America song. There are lots of familiar landmarks. It's a song covered in soot but lit with a beautiful sunset. As we travel through the cities and villages, and field after field passes us by as we enter into endless foothills. But don't miss the biblical allusions. I'm not going to list them. I'll let you have the fun of spotting them yourself. But you know what? It leads me to think, maybe this is the land of promise after all. Well, I don't know. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But maybe, just maybe, God can meet us even here. He did, after all, come into our world in a lonely stable at a very troubled time and place. But even then, it wasn't so much about the place itself. The kingdom of heaven is coming and is now here. Even here, in the land of our sojourn, where the Holy King of Israel loves us here, in America.
This is a song we wrote over in Ireland because the Irish people kept asking us what America was like. Not that they didn't know, it's just that they don't have a lot of televisions over there, so they have conversations for entertainment. And they will ask you all kinds of things that they already know just to get you started. But being dumb Americans, we thought they really were stupid. So we decided to write a song that would try to describe America to them. And this was one of the songs that took us a long time to write, and we're not particularly proud of it. But after you spend that much time writing a song, you're going to record it whether you like it or not. So this is the worst song we'll do all night. How about that? Don't you hate it when you go to a concert and someone apologizes all the way through? That, and when somebody says, we're going to do a song, and it goes something like this. And you go, look, buddy, I paid exactly $20 to hear this. What does it go exactly like? Actually, I like this song a lot. And the coal trucks come a-running with their bellies full of coal, and their big wheels are humming down this road that lies open at the soul of a woman who hid the spies that were looking for the land of the milk and the honey. And this road, she is a woman. She was made from a rib cut from the sides of these mountains. Oh, these great sleeping atoms who are lonely even here in paradise. Lonely for somebody to kiss them, and I'll sing my song. And I'll sing my song in the land of my sojourn. And the lady in the harbor, she still holds her torch out to those huddled masses who are yearning for a freedom that still eludes them. And the immigrants' children see their brightest dreams shattered here on the New Jersey shoreline, in the greed and the glitter of those high-tech casinos. But some mendicants wander off to a cathedral, and they stoop in the silence, and they're there. Prayers are still whispered, and I'll sing their song. And I'll sing their song in the land of my sojourn. Nobody tells you when you get born here how much you'll come to love it and how you'll never belong here. So I'll call you my country, but I'll be lonely for my home. And I wish that I could take you there with me. And down the brown brick spine of some dirty blind alley, all them drain pipes were dripping out the last sons of thunder. While off in the distance, the smokestacks were belching back this city's best answer. And the country countryside was pocked with all of those mail pouch posters thrown up on the rotting sideboards of these run-down stables, like the one that Christ was born in when the old world started dying and the new world started coming on. And I'll sing his song, and I'll sing his song in the land of my sojourn. I will sing his song in the land of my sojourn. I will sing his song.
For the past 2 hours, you've been listening to a Ragamuffin Archive Revisited special presentation, celebrating the 30th anniversary of A Liturgy, A Legacy, and A Ragamuffin Band. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to follow us on social media. It's Ragamuffin Archive on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and X, formerly Twitter. And you can also reach me by email at ragamuffinarchive@gmail.com. And of course, you can always leave a comment on YouTube. The song you're hearing is Ted Yoder's cover of Here in America from his album Lean In. You can find more of his music at tedyoder.com or on Bandcamp. Also heard throughout this episode was Ashley K. Davis's cover of 78 Eatonwood Green from the album Sojourners, a tribute to Rich Mullins. Join us next time for another deep dive into the archive. I'm Joe Cook. Have a great week.